Welcome, brave souls, to another episode of our scary stories. I am your guide into the realm of fear and the unknown. This episode is called Highway of Shadows. Tonight, we join Eric and Nora on a drive that they will never forget. A drive down a deserted highway where their rearview mirror holds a deeper and more terrifying reality. Can they escape this never-ending pursuit? Or will they be trapped in this horrifying cycle forever? Close your eyes, tune in your senses, and let's embark on this chilling journey together. Are you ready? Well then, let's dive in. Nora and Eric, a couple bound by years of shared laughter, whispered secrets, and the occasional stubborn silence, found themselves on a stretch of highway that seemed to disappear into the ink-black night. Their eyes, heavy with the weight of the late hour and the hypnotic lull of the road, battled the encroaching tendrils of sleep. The persistent hum of their sedan's tires on the asphalt was a monotonous drone in the cool air that filled the vehicle. The dashboard clock's icy blue digits marked a time when most were asleep, tucked away in their warm, safe homes. Nora shifted in her seat, her jean-clad knees brushing against the worn leather, as she stole a glance at Eric. The dim glow from the dashboard illuminated Eric's features in a soft, otherworldly light. Shadows danced in the hollows of his cheeks, highlighting his determined focus on the seemingly endless road. His grip on the steering wheel was firm, but not tense. Nora felt a familiar comfort in his silent resilience. The car's radio, previously belting out a hit from their youth, now resonated with nothing but static. Theirs was a world swathed in a blanket of solitude and an orchestra of white noise. Each word they spoke felt intrusive, breaking the spell the road had cast. "Looks like we're really alone out here," Nora remarked, her voice barely above a whisper. She reached to flick a loose strand of hair away from her face, her fingers brushing against the cold window pane. "Yeah, it's like we're the last two people on Earth," Eric said, his voice settling comfortably in the silence. "A whole highway to ourselves." Outside, an ocean of darkness stretched out, interrupted only by the probing beams of the car's headlights. The soft glow captured fragments of their surroundings. Eric's attention was briefly drawn to a scattering of stars in the pitch-black canvas of the sky. It was an open night, free of clouds, where celestial bodies peered down like watchful eyes. A soft gust of wind rustled the leaves of the trees lining the highway, their whispered secrets lost to the vastness. With a sudden flicker, their solitude was broken. An unexpected sight, almost surreal, came into view. A group of children stood in the middle of the deserted highway. The suddenness of their appearance, their pale skin against the dark, and their lack of explanation made Eric's heart skip a beat. The scene was eerily silent, except for the dull hum of the engine and the crunching gravel under slowing tires. As they moved closer, Eric noticed the children's eyes, black as night, void of any innocence or fear. His breath hitched, an uncanny feeling twisting in his gut. The headlights bathed the children in an ethereal glow, further emphasizing their unearthly appearance. "Eric," Nora's voice faltered as her hand found his, her fingers threading through his in a silent plea for reassurance. Her gaze was locked onto the children, their black eyes reflecting the headlights' glare. Something primal within Eric stirred, an instinct too loud to ignore. He felt Nora's grip tighten as he pressed on the accelerator, speeding past the children, his heart pounding in sync with the thumping rhythm of the car over the road joints. The rearview mirror captured the last of the children's figures shrinking into the night. Their ghastly faces, bleached by the headlights, were etched into his memory. Eric's heart hammered in his chest like a wild drum, the rhythmic throb echoing in his ears. His knuckles, wrapped tightly around the leather-wrapped steering wheel, were as pale as the specters they'd left behind. "Nora," Eric began, but the words withered in his throat. He glanced over to see her slouched in her seat, her complexion pallid under the dim glow of the dashboard lights. Her wide, hazel eyes, usually so full of light, now mirrored the fear that twisted like a cold hand in his stomach. A single bead of sweat made its slow journey down the side of her face, glistening in the faint light before disappearing into the collar of her sweater. "Did you see their eyes, Eric?" She managed to stutter, her voice barely audible over the dull roar of the engine. They were black, completely black. "I saw," he responded, his voice strained. The image of their jet-black eyes, void of emotion or life, was burned into his mind. For a moment, they fell silent. The only sounds were the rhythmic thumping of tires on the asphalt, the occasional flutter of wind against the windows, and the steady, calming hum of the engine. Each seemed to magnify their isolation, emphasizing the emptiness of the world outside their little bubble. Eric dared a glance in the rearview mirror, the small reflective rectangle revealing the world they'd left behind. The sight that greeted him stole the warmth from his body as though he'd plunged into a winter lake. There they stood, the children as pale and as ghostly as before, their black eyes fixed on the receding vehicle. Except they were no longer distant. Somehow, impossibly, they were closer than they should have been. A gasp caught in his throat, the blood in his veins turning to ice. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, his eyes flicking between the mirror and the long stretch of deserted road ahead. "Eric," Nora asked, her voice quivering. She followed his gaze to the mirror. Her sharp intake of breath confirmed what he feared. Their once mundane journey had become a race against shadows. Eric pushed the pedal further down, the engine responding with a reassuring growl. The world outside became a blur of grays and blacks, the spectral children shrinking again in the mirror. But as the car sped through the silent night, they knew, with a chilling certainty, that this ride was far from over. The echoes of their encounter lingered in the air, a grim melody underscored by the purring of the car's engine, the soft rustling of fabric as they shifted in their seats, and the occasional glances they shared. Each was a reminder of the reality that had skewed into the realms of the unthinkable. The solitude of the highway was no longer a comforting blanket of silence. It had turned into a predatory entity, hunting them down under the watchful eyes of the star-studded sky. Their car, once a haven, was now a vessel steering them through the depths of an unending nightmare, its course dictated by the chilling apparitions reflected in the rearview mirror. And yet they pressed on, guided by the glimmering hope of reaching the safety of their home and the imminent dawn that promised to shed light on the mysteries of the night. The sedan ate up the miles under the shroud of darkness, its headlights slicing through the night like a lighthouse's beam over a storm-tossed sea. Inside, the tension was a living thing, curling around them like a predatory beast. They rode in silence, the once comforting hum of the car engine now sounding like a warning drum echoing in their ears. The greenish glow of a sign up ahead bathed a portion of the highway in an eerie radiance. The bold, white numbers painted on it read, Mile 88. This usually mundane milestone had a chilling significance tonight. It was here, right by this mile marker, that the spectral children had first appeared, their presence turning the ordinary into the extraordinary, the safe into the sinister. Eric's eyes darted between the road ahead and the rearview mirror, each glance revealing the unsettling sight of the children, maintaining their disturbing proximity. Their eyes, black as coal and devoid of life, were fixed on him, their unblinking gaze following the receding car. Nora sat rigid in her seat, her fingers gripped tight around the pendant she always wore, an old heirloom passed down from her grandmother. It was a nervous habit, one she fell into whenever she felt anxious or scared. Tonight, she was both. The rhythmic clinking of the pendant against the window provided a counterpoint to the droning engine and the monotonous whisper of the tires on the asphalt. As they neared Mile 88, the static-filled radio burst into life. The crackling, distorted voice of a late-night radio host echoed in the confines of the car, an unexpected intrusion that made both of them jump. "Drive safe, folks," the host's voice rasped through the speakers, distorted as though spoken through a mouthful of gravel. "It's a wild world out there." Then, as suddenly as it had sparked to life, the radio fell silent again, surrendering to the relentless static. Eric and Nora exchanged a nervous look, the host's words lingering in the air like an ominous portent. Taking a deep breath, Eric gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles bone-white. He could feel the perspiration trickling down his back, the chill of the night air seeping in from somewhere and making him shudder. He thought of reaching out, adjusting the heating controls, but his eyes remained locked on the rearview mirror and the ghastly figures reflected in it. In a tone barely more than a whisper, Nora broke the silence. Should we stop the car?" Eric's gaze slid sideways to meet hers. Her eyes were wide, her lower lip caught between her teeth, a picture of fear that echoed his own dread. "And do what, Nora?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "We don't know who they are, or even what those things are." As they passed Mile 88, a chill ran down their spines, their senses heightened to the spectral presence that was trailing them. Eric's foot pressed down on the accelerator, determined to increase the distance between them and the enigmatic children. But even as they left the mile marker behind, the black-eyed children seemed to be advancing, their figures growing larger in the rearview mirror with each passing second. The once deserted highway was no longer a path to safety, but a spiral into a growing nightmare. Nora and Eric shared a glance, their silent agreement hanging in the air. They had to outrun this inexplicable terror. The question was, could they? As Mile 88 receded into the background, replaced by the ever-stretching highway ahead, the eerie game of cat and mouse continued, transforming their routine journey into a relentless escape from the unexplainable presence following them. The highway continued its serpentine path through the dense forest on either side, the trees reaching up towards the pitch-black sky like spectral hands, their gnarled silhouettes adding to the eerie atmosphere. Here and there, an occasional critter scurried away from the intrusive headlights, their glowing eyes adding to the unsettling tableau of the night. Suddenly, Nora gasped, pointing to the right. A deer stood frozen in the car's high beams, its eyes reflecting an uncanny glow. Time seemed to slow as Eric swerved sharply to avoid it, the tires screaming in protest. The world tilted around them as the car fishtailed, struggling to regain control. The deer, caught in the spectral light, appeared as a phantasmal apparition before leaping into the underbrush, its white tail flashing a final goodbye. Eric eased the car back onto the road, his heart pounding against his ribcage. Nora clutched the dashboard, her knuckles pale. The incident, though jarring, was mundane, a slice of ordinary life that seemed almost alien amidst their extraordinary predicament. "Are you okay?" Eric asked, his voice shaking slightly, his eyes never leaving the road. "I am," Nora replied, her breath shaky. She looked at Eric, concern etched on her face. "Are you?" "I think so," he responded, swallowing hard. He spared a glance at the rearview mirror, half expecting the children to have disappeared. Instead, they remained in view, seemingly unperturbed by the near collision, their black eyes as eerily fixated as before. Nora followed his gaze and sighed, her grip tightening on her grandmother's pendant. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, something she hadn't done since she was a child. It was a plea for protection, for guidance through the dark uncertainty that had taken hold of their journey. Her whisper seemed to echo in the car's confines, bouncing off the cold glass and mixing with the low growl of the engine. It was a small sound, one that wouldn't have been heard in a crowded room. But there, amidst the haunting shadows of their plight, it boomed like a cathedral bell, its resonance promising fortitude. However, despite the whispered prayers and the heightened senses, the unnerving chase continued. Their spectral pursuers remained an ever-present shadow in their rearview mirror, as relentless as the night itself. As the sedan plowed through the deserted highway, its occupants locked in a cycle of fear and determination. The marker for Mile 88 became a speck in the distance. Their journey was far from over, and the unknown stretched out before them like a foreboding abyss. They were afloat in a sea of uncertainty, their only lifeline the thin thread of hope that dawn would bring an end to their nightmarish ride. As the mile markers blurred past, one after the other, a chilling thought nestled in their hearts. They were racing not just against the black-eyed children, but against their own fear. And as the abyss of the night deepened, they couldn't help but wonder, would dawn ever come? Would their terrifying encounter ever end? Or were they trapped in an endless loop of fear and pursuit, their fate forever bound to the horrifying image in the rearview mirror? The highway, once a ribbon of possibility and freedom, now felt like a tunnel, a dark corridor guiding them through an unseen labyrinth of fear. The monotony of the road was broken occasionally by the artificial illumination of overhead lights. They flickered, casting an unstable, jittery light that painted eerie shapes in the shadowy corners of the road. Each flash of brightness was a small relief, a tiny island of reality in a sea of shadows. Nora, trying to distract herself from the otherworldly figures in the mirror, looked to her side. Through the window, she watched the forest flit by, a dark blur occasionally punctuated by the ghostly white of birch trees. The forest seemed to throb with a strange rhythm, as though it were a living entity, its shadowy breath rushing past them in a frigid gust. A soft, mournful howl broke through the night, a nocturnal serenade that danced through the crisp air. Nora's gaze shifted skyward, her eyes drawn to the moon. It hung low, a silver orb cradled by wisps of clouds, casting an eerie glow that glinted off the car's sleek surface. It was a haunting beacon amidst the dark, a solitary watcher over their nightmarish journey. Meanwhile, Eric's grip on the steering wheel was unwavering, his eyes locked on the road ahead, darting occasionally to the rearview mirror. He could feel Nora's apprehension, a shared unease that spread through the car's cabin like a chill. His throat was parched, his tongue heavy in his mouth. Without warning, the overhead lights dimmed, then blinked out, plunging them into a darkness deeper than before. The beams from their headlights seemed to shrink back, as if frightened by the all-encompassing darkness. Eric felt his heart rate spike. He wrestled with the rising panic, forcing himself to keep his eyes on the road. As his eyes adjusted, he noticed the faint glimmer of a structure up ahead. The gas station at the roadside appeared deserted, its own lights flickering feebly. He could barely make out the rusted sign swaying in the wind, the squeaking hinge of faint but haunting melody in the silent night. "Eric, maybe we should stop," Nora suggested, her voice small against the growl of the engine. "We could use the phone, call for help." He considered her words, weighing their options. But as he glanced in the rearview mirror, his breath hitched. The spectral children were there, their obsidian eyes glinting in the dim light of their tail lamps. They were closer now, their faces appearing clearer than before. Their mouths were small, almost non-existent, and their skin was a sickly white, contrasting sharply with their dark eyes. "No," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't stop." His decision made, he pressed the pedal further, the car surging forward with renewed determination. As they zoomed past the gas station, its solitary existence soon faded into the distance. All the while, their uninvited passengers continued their silent pursuit, etched into the rearview mirror. Their presence was an unspoken dare, a challenge to the couple's resolve. Their silent message was clear: escape was not an option. The road ahead was as uncertain as ever, and the shadows of fear danced in their wake, forming a dark symphony of the lost. The spectral children in the mirror were a reminder of their plight, their black eyes mirrors of the dark unknown. But amid the looming dread, Eric and Nora clung to one another. Their determination to survive pulsated like a steady heartbeat in the still of the night. As the sedan plunged further into the heart of the nocturnal abyss, the artificial glow of the dashboard bathed their anxious faces. The fuel gauge caught Eric's eye, and his heart sank. The needle was drifting toward him, an additional worry that they didn't need. His jaw clenched, and he cast a sidelong glance at Nora, hoping she hadn't noticed. But he saw her eyes, wide and reflective, mirroring the dashboard's glow, fixed on the fuel gauge. "Eric," Nora began, her voice trembling. "I know, Nora," he cut in, trying to mask his own fear with a reassurance he didn't feel. "I see it." Minutes stretched into eternities as they continued their drive. Each second was a battle against the creeping fear, against the enigma that relentlessly trailed them. The forest on either side seemed to grow denser, its trees now a thick wall of darkness that loomed over them. The once familiar highway, with its dotted lines and reflective signage, had transformed into a strange, threatening labyrinth. Their previous lives, before their encounter with the black-eyed children, felt like distant memories. Suddenly, the spectral figures in the rearview mirror moved. It was a slight shift, almost imperceptible. Yet it seemed to ripple through the car's cabin, sending a chill down their spines. The children's heads tilted in unison, their dead, black eyes never leaving the terrified couple. The silence that had ruled their journey was broken by a low hum emanating from the rearview mirror. It was a soft, rhythmic thrum, like a heartbeat echoing in the vastness of the night. It filled the car, resonating with their own racing heartbeats, intertwining reality with the supernatural. "Eric," Nora whispered, her fingers tracing the cool metal of her pendant. The vibrations hummed against her touch, an unnatural rhythm that sent shivers through her. "I hear it, Nora," he replied, his voice barely audible. The humming seeped into his bones, a spectral song that played on the strings of his growing fear. In the face of the insurmountable, Eric and Nora found strength in their shared fear. They held on to the silence, the hum, the diminishing fuel, and the relentless pursuit of the black-eyed children as their lifeline. They held on to each other, their bond the only beacon in their seemingly endless night. Their journey continued, shrouded by the dark and the dread of the unknown. The rhythmic thrum persisted, weaving a nocturne that would be etched in their memories forever. They were caught in the interlude of their nightmare, each moment a dissonant chord in their symphony of fear. They drove on, consumed by the unfathomable abyss that swallowed the highway before them. The fuel gauge now wavered perilously close to empty. Fear and tension knitted themselves into the crevices of the car, filling the space with an icy chill that made them shudder. The hum from the mirror grew louder, becoming a malevolent orchestra that filled their ears with an unholy symphony. Suddenly, like a beacon cutting through the monstrous belly of darkness, a glimmering light flickered on the horizon. The glowing apparition grew more substantial as they approached. It was a gas station, eerily similar to the one they had passed before, but this one, bathing in the soft luminescence of buzzing neon lights, seemed alive. "Eric, we have to stop," Nora said, her voice strained with desperation. Eric nodded, agreeing without a word. The sedan pulled into the station, its worn tires crunching over the gravel, bringing them to a stop by the pumps. The car's engine fell silent, and in its wake, the omnipresent hum from the mirror ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence that hung heavily around them. They stared at the building adjoining the pumps. It was a single-story structure, aged but well kept. The windows of the small convenience store were adorned with faded advertisements of cigarettes and alcohol, promising solace to lost souls. A dim light seeped through the blinds, indicating a presence within. With a look of mutual understanding, they exited the car, their legs stiff from hours of fear-filled driving. The cool night air felt heavy around them, carrying a note of foreboding that sent shivers down their spines. Keeping a cautious eye on what was behind them, they approached the store. The door creaked open to reveal a cozy, somewhat cluttered interior. The store smelled of fresh coffee and old paper, a comforting aroma that was a stark contrast to the unending terror they had been enduring. Behind the counter stood an elderly man, his face lined with years of hardship and solitude. His rheumy eyes scanned them, a flicker of curiosity flashing briefly before being replaced by a knowing look. He had the air of someone who had spent a lifetime in the company of lost travelers and late-night confessions. "Evening, folks," he greeted, a soft twang to his words. "Late-night travelers, aren't you?" Eric nodded, opening his mouth to respond, but the words clung stubbornly to his throat. Nora stepped in, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Yes, we've been driving for a while. We need some fuel, and, if possible, some information." The old man nodded, understanding reflected in his gaze. As they refueled and restocked, they shared their uncanny story with him. His face remained inscrutable, and he listened intently, his gaze never leaving theirs. As they finished, an eerie silence fell over the store. Then the old man, with a heaviness in his eyes, shared tales of the highway, tales of the lost, the damned, and the eternally pursued. The black-eyed children, it seemed, were not just their horror, but a collective nightmare. As they stepped out into the chilling embrace of the night, his parting words resonated in their ears. Sometimes, the highway doesn't just take you to a destination. It takes you through an experience, a journey of the soul. He assured them that the sun would rise again and the horrors of the past were best left behind them. The old man told them to keep moving forward and to stop for no one or no thing. Strengthened sense of resolve, they were not alone in their ordeal. The words of the old man echoed in their minds, knitting into their fear, and creating a tapestry of determination. The car roared back to life, its headlights piercing the consuming darkness, the engine's rhythm now synchronous with their heartbeats. And so, fortified with newfound courage, they pressed on. The spectral children, once a horrifying sight in the rearview mirror, were now faded apparitions, remnants of the twilight trapped in the dawn of a new beginning. Their car cut through the lingering darkness, its engine humming in symphony with the breaking dawn, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos that had ensued. The shadows of the forest receded, retreating into their dens, revealing a world bathed in the soft glow of the early morning light. As they journeyed out of the forest's ominous grip, they could see the deserted highway stretch ahead of them, not a destination, but a pathway to renewed hopes. The spectral children were gone, but their memory remained, a chilling reminder of their harrowing journey through the heart of darkness. Finally, the highway led them out of the forest. The woods, with its haunting specters and gnarled branches, lay behind them. As the sun ascended higher in the sky, the world around them warmed. They glanced back, the spectral children now a chapter in their shared past. An experience they would never forget, a journey of the soul that would forever be etched in their hearts. With the old man's words ringing in their ears, they understood their ordeal was not merely an escape from the pursuit, but a journey into their deepest fears and out again. The highway had led them through a harrowing experience, but it had also guided them to a destination, a dawn filled with promise and hope. They had emerged stronger, their bond fortified by shared terror and triumphant victory. And there you have it, our dear listeners. The eerie tale of Highway of Shadows has come to its end. Eric and Nora managed to escape their relentless pursuers, but at what cost? Remember, the shadows in your own life may take many forms, and not all reflections show the complete truth. But heed the old man's words. The sun will rise again, and we need to keep moving forward. The horrors of our past are best left behind you. Thank you for joining us on this horrifying journey. Stay brave, stay vigilant, and remember, the next time you drive down a deserted highway, keep an eye on your rearview mirror, but stop for no one or no thing. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.